Cord Jefferson was an Emmy winner for Watchmen. Other projects have included Master of None, The Good Place, and Station 11. And his new feature is American Fiction. Cord, this is a great movie. I love it so much. It's really, I felt
Thank
seems
you.
like two movies in one, right? A very sharp satire about race, and then also this really affecting and like really emotional family drama. And I guess you blend it so well in the story. I guess visually, I wanted to ask, like, how did you approach making it feel like these were not separate? You know what I mean, like that it is one story, and like how you kind of like visually approached that aspect of it.
I think that is sort of the way that I approached it visually the way that we approached the whole movie, right? Which was that I wanted to make a movie that felt like life. And, when you have tragedies in your personal life, the rest of your life doesn't stop. And sort of like when you have sort of successes in your professional life, your personal life doesn't stop. These things are sort of like all one and the same. And so to me, I just wanted to make sure that we struck the right tone in those two worlds because I wanted to make sure that the movie was satirical, of course, but never farcical. And so we just wanted to keep everything really grounded, And so from the, you know, uh, we got a production designer that I thought was incredible named Jonathan Guggenheim. And sort of Jonathan and I just really went over the spaces and decided that we really wanted them to feel lived in and authentic. I didn't want anything to feel too hyper stylized or sort of like too bland. I wanted it to feel like real people lived and worked in these places. And so he just went through and sort of like found a bunch of really great locations. The movie was entirely shot on location. We found really great, beautiful, old lived-in homes and banquet halls and stuff in the Boston area. And then, the visual references that I gave the cinematographer were things like Wonder Boys and Squid and the Whale and these kinds of other sort of New Englandy, literary, lived in kind of like brownstones and homes. So I just wanted it to feel, a unified sense that this was a real lived in place, that these were real characters, that these were real human beings, and that the places that they lived in had a real sense of history. I wanted sort of like to feel the sense of history in these places and sort of like the fading glamour, for instance, of the family home and sort of like the erosion of wealth and their sort of beach house, like these kinds of things. I wanted them to feel authentic to the story, and I wanted them to feel like, as I said, unified and never silly. I wanted it to feel real and grounded the entire way through.
Right. You mentioned early in that answer there about the tone too. Obviously, I think this is like it does feel like a high wire act because the tone is so specific and like really like locked in. You have this Jeffrey Wright performance at the center that is just incredible, and he's like seemingly like one of those performances where it's like you can't imagine when you watch the film, you're like, I can't actually imagine anybody else doing this because he does it so well. So I guess like how like I'm sure like casting Jeffrey Wright, it's like of course you could cast Jeffrey Wright, but I guess like how did you work with him and like kind of like how did you guys discuss Monk and like how like like how your collaboration kind of evolved?
It was amazing. I mean, I couldn't think of anything but Jeffrey Wright either. That's why, when I was reading the novel Erasure that I adapted, when I was still reading the novel the first time through, I started picturing Jeffrey Wright as Monk in the book. Like I started reading the book in his voice. And so that's how early that I knew I wanted Jeffrey. And so he was the first actor we went to with the script. He signed on, and then, everything sort of Jeffrey signing on really legitimized the movie in a lot of people's eyes. The financiers were willing to come up with more money when Jeffrey signed on. Other actors were very excited to work on the film because they got to work with Jeffrey. So it really sort of like it became a sort of like a real thing when Jeffrey came aboard to many people. And so the great thing about Jeffrey and the terrifying thing about Jeffrey, as you said, is he's got this tremendous pedigree and he's sort of like done all these great roles. And sort of the first time I saw him was in Angels in America, the Mike Nichols adaptation for HBO. And I was just mesmerized by him. And so, I was so happy that I got to work with him, but also so intimidated because, this is a guy who's worked with literally the biggest directors in the world. He works on the biggest movies and TV shows in the world. And so here's me coming in, having never directed anything before, saying like, would you do my movie with me, Mr. Wright? And the thing, though, that I realized was that the reason Jeffrey is a great actor, well, one of the reasons Jeffrey is a great actor is because he's hyper collaborative, because he sort of really wants to get in there and work with the director and work with the costume designer and work with everybody to sort of really find the story and mine for the truth in there. And so it was just easy working with him from day one. From day one, he was super collaborative. He sort of like was asking me about my thoughts and my ideas, and sort of really sort of digging down to the material in a real way that sort of showed to me he was serious about the work and serious about the material, and taking me seriously as a director, despite the fact that I'd never done it before. And so that, to me, sort of him taking me seriously allowed myself to take myself seriously in a way, because it was like, this is a guy who believes in you. And sort of, even when I didn't believe in myself and I felt really terrified at the prospect of directing a movie, I looked at a guy like Jeffrey and the rest of the tremendous cast who had done this work before and who really believed in me and believed in the project. And it gave me the courage when I sort of didn't feel like I had the courage myself.
You mentioned your first time director. Was there how did your going into it, the preconceived notions maybe you had, and how those kind of exploded, I'm assuming, and how what was I guess had you how did it exceed your expectations, or what was different from what you expected, I guess, from being a first time director at all, or anything like that?
I mean, I think one of the things that jumped out at me when I first started it was that I realized that in some ways I'd been directing as a writer for years, right? So I'd been writing for TV for about 6 years before I found this novel. And, what I didn't realize was that, when I was writing scenes, I was already thinking about what these characters are wearing, right? Or thinking already how these actors are going to move around the space, or what the room should look like, or how I want them to enunciate this word in this line, and how I want them to tell this joke, how I want this joke to land. These are all things that I was already thinking about when I was writing scenes. I just wasn't articulating them to anybody, because a TV writer's job, is you write the script and then you email it in, and the director takes over, and the showrunner takes over. And so I sort of didn't realize that I was already doing the work, and sort of in some ways, obviously I don't want to be reductive. There's more to directing than just sort of those things. But, in some ways I was already thinking in the way that a director thinks, about these things. And so that's one thing that surprised me. And then the second thing I think that surprised me was how much I really loved it. I love working on TV shows. I still do. It's something I want to do forever. I learned a lot from all the shows I work on. I'm incredibly grateful for those opportunities. But I think that a thing that I didn't know that I was missing out on necessarily was just the joy of being on set. I really, really loved being on set, and I really loved, TV writing it's a great gig, but TV writing, most of the time is you drive onto set, you drive onto the studio lot at 10 a.m. and you sort of order an expensive salad from Jones on 3rd for lunch, and then you sort of drive home at 6 p.m. and you're in an air-conditioned room all day with these other writers. And don't get me wrong, it's a collaborative to work with other writers, but it's so different from being on set and sort of, being there at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, freezing and hungry, and you're out there with 60 other people, and the camaraderie that builds, and sort of, it's just really sort of, if you can boil it down into anything, it's just creative problem solving. That's what sort of directing is in many ways. It's just every day, inevitably, something's going to go wrong. Probably multiple things are going to go wrong, and you need to figure out how to make it right with sort of what you have in front of you. And so to me, that kind of, I just loved the group effort of that. I loved working with all these people and sort of being in the trenches and getting my hands dirty in a real way. That's something that I knew that it was going to be hard, and I prepared myself for that. And I think I was surprised by how, despite the fact that it was much harder than anything I'd ever done in my professional life, that I loved it so much. It's maybe not even in spite of the difficulty, but because of the difficulty. I really liked that.
Yeah, I mean, the love I think you have for the film, it comes through in the film, because I think it is incredibly successful. And obviously, we're talking it's coming out here in December, and one at the audience award at TIFF, it's been obviously very well received. One of the things I was wondering is it's a really great satire about progressive white kind of entertainment industry, and just a very sharp, and you're showing the film. A lot of the audiences are the people that are being satirized, and I guess how have you been surprised by the response to it, or has that exceeded, or have your expectations for how it would play been tweaked at all by how it has played? I guess I don't even know.
No, when I sat down to make this movie from the very beginning, I wanted to make a movie that felt like it was a Big Ten film, that it was inviting to a lot of different kinds of people. I didn't want to make a movie that was for people in New York and Los Angeles. I think that one of the things that I think that we are in the most polarizing time of my, at least my entire life. I'm 41, and this is the most divided I've ever seen our nation, and in many ways the entire world. And I think that the only way we move past that reality is if we can find ways to sort of talk to each other and sort of like and not sort of like retreat to our own corners and just sort of like live in our own bubbles of our own news and our own information and our own entertainment and our own music. Like, I just think that there needs to be some sort of cohesion amongst people again. And so I didn't want, I think that I understand like issues of race and issues of identity and issues of sexuality. These are important issues, and sometimes they have fatal consequences. I understand sort of people's impulse to be self-serious about these things, but I didn't want to make a movie that felt, I think there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I think that sort of like there's more than one way to build empathy. And I think one of those ways is just inviting people in and sort of like letting them laugh and saying like, look, this is all a little ridiculous, and sort of like come in and enjoy yourself and laugh and have a good time. And, sit there next to a stranger who may think differently from you politically or about race or about sort of identity, and sort of like find something that you can meet in the middle on. That to me was always the goal. And so, I've been delighted to see, as you said, we've shown it to predominantly Black audiences, we've shown it to predominantly white audiences, we've shown it at Black colleges, we've shown it to young people, to old people, to fancy film festivals, to sort of like, just general sort of like audiences, to English. We've shown it in Europe now. Like there's just, and sort of, there's been people who have come out, all different kinds of people across the spectrum, and told me that they found something that they really enjoyed. And then even, there was a woman that came up to me in Savannah, Georgia. We showed it at SCAD, an older white woman, and she said, I realized halfway through the movie that I was laughing at myself, and that sort of like I was the white woman that I was laughing at. And she said, but it felt so good. It just felt so nice to do that. And I think that there really is a desire, I think, for people to take a breath a little bit and stop being, I feel, at least me, I feel like I've been on alert for like 20 years, and I'm ready to stop being so tense and to find some joy. And I think people are excited to go to movie theaters and laugh and sort of like, and be in that communal experience of sort of what it feels like to laugh with a bunch of people and experience these emotions with a bunch of people. So, yeah, I've just been overjoyed that there's a joke, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a joke in the movie about white people in the Hamptons, and we showed the movie at the Hamptons Film Festival, and there was white people in the Hamptons screaming the joke at me like on the street, who sort of like were so into it and had such a good time. And it felt like, it's not mean spirited. It's sort of like, it's not lectury, it's not scoldy. And so that was the movie that I wanted to make. And I'm really happy that people are coming in and enjoying themselves.
Yeah, it's very well said. And I think it really succeeds. And like you were saying, like there's a humanity to it, just like people, like it feels like people just acting like they would like with your neighbors or stuff, you know what I mean? Like everything is so polarized online, but when you get just people face to face and talking, like it does make things just a lot more, I don't know, reasonable, I guess. I don't even know.
You start to see people as human beings.
Yeah.
You start to realize that before political ideology or sex or race or anything, like just, or nationality, like people are just human beings, and I think that's sort of like, that's easy to forget when you're just looking at each other through computer screens.
Yeah. We have to wrap up there, but it's a great film, Cord Jefferson, American Fiction.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.